Mychal. I'm a sommelier, tarot card reader, and former ballerina.
I'm Suzanne. I am a writer, an author, and a podcaster.
And this is All the Woo, A to Z. And we are doing our second episode of a Seasonette for Astrology.
First of all, we want to welcome everybody to the table.
Yes.
Which is an actual physical table at this moment.
Yes.
And this is just a non-judgmental space. We're here to share our stories and our experiences.
And hopefully, at the very least, you're just entertained.
So what are we drinking for Seasonette to Astrology, which is going to be reading a natal chart?
Yes, we are going to be doing that. So the wine that we're going to do, again, on this whole biodynamic thing, and then I'll be reading to you somebody else's description of the wine, another professional's description of the wine, and kind of go through that. So the wine that we're drinking today is produced by a winery called Brooks, and it's their Bois Joli Riesling, and they are located in the Yola Amity Hills, which is in Oregon. And the description of the wine is this: apricots, Meyer lemon, thyme, petrichor, with aromas of lemon curd, white tea, guava, and tonic water, and a wee bit of talc. Nice acidity. And this is written by Wine Enthusiast, which is,
when you're in the wine
magazine.
store, when they have a little clip on there that says, Wine Enthusiast gave it 90%.
Yeah, or 90 points. Yes.
90 points.
Yes. It's one of the
I may
people.
have already had a little bit of the wine.
It's pretty good. I don't blame you. But with this, the reason why I'm going through this whole exercise is really to kind of point out some words in particular that may not sound desirable, like petrol and maybe petrichor. I don't know if a lot of people want talc in their wine, right? As far as flavor, but beyond that, with the use of nice acidity. And as a professional myself, I try not to use the word acidity when I'm talking to people about wine. I try to use other verbiage because I think when people hear acid, it does not translate in a very positive light for ingesting. And so for that reason, I leave it out. But when you're doing an assessment of wine, acidity is referring to the actual scientific levels of acidity in a wine, and how you measure that, if you all want to know, is actually how fast your saliva fills up after you take a sip of wine. So that's actually one of the tests that you do. It's not that tart flavor. Mm-hmm. It's not a flavor component. It's a reaction that your body has, as a matter of fact.
And so what we are learning from this is
combination of how verbiage and interpretations can be different. So in all the words that I just used that this person that they had used for their description of the wine.
Petrichor, shout out to all Whovians.
But also, I may not use the same verbiage in order to describe because it's my own interpretation. All those things are still there, and I may pick up other things that this person did not mention. And it doesn't mean that I'm getting something different than they are. It's just what stands out to us. And so then the words that we use, and not always the words that we use to describe things, mean the same to me as they would to you.
Yeah, everybody has their own personal definitions, especially of words that are kind of loaded.
Right. And I think that astrology is also very much this way when you're doing or getting an interpretation of a chart, which is what we're doing today. So
nice object lesson.
Yes.
Tasty object lesson.
So you're going to hear my paper shuffling. I have lots of papers around me at this moment in time, so sorry for the extra noise.
So we are reading the chart of the podcast.
Yes, that is named Podsy.
We're calling it Podsy.
Podsy is our podcast person that we've created a chart for.
The entity. And we're doing this because, we were very curious. Any time that something is birthed, conceived, whether it is an idea or a business, obviously a human being, all of those kinds of things, there is a snapshot of that moment. And one of the things that astrology holds is that snapshot can indicate a lot about the life of that entity, business, whatever.
Yes.
And so we, interestingly enough, We had multiple dates of things that we had done, the classes that we took in order to be able to do this, the times we got together and brainstormed. And we had gone through a whole other version of this with a different natal chart that we
Yes.
were both we had multiple times and we weren't real sure about whatever. And for whatever reason, the technology, you could say it was Mercury retrograde,
Hmm.
or you could say it was helping us. The technology failed.
Yes.
And then Michael opened her book and was like, oh, I have this date. And it turns out it's probably the earliest, most foundational date.
Yes. It was, I think, one of our first meetings that we ever got together to talk about the podcast. And I happened to have not only the date, but the time.
And we were kind of like,
Why didn't we see
huh.
this before?
Intuitively, this seems like a whole lot of, okay, we're closing off this door and closing off this door. Maybe they'll see that this is. So we ran the podcast entity's birth at that time
Hmm.
and we're blown away.
Yes.
And so we were very much claiming, okay, this is our podcast's birth date.
And not to say that the other chart wasn't applicable, it still was because it still occurred at times that we were meeting and working on the podcast. So it still carried
Weight.
weight.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other ones weren't altogether wrong, but wasn't necessarily the truest picture of the
The future also that we're
yes.
hoping for.
Yes, exactly.
So,
Anyway,
people don't get to pick this thing, but for business, you absolutely can.
yes.
So,
when was the birth of your business?
when was the birth of your business?
Is what you need to decide.
So, Podsy is a Sagittarius with an ascendant in Pisces.
Which is super cool for so many reasons. There's so much that's happening with this Pisces thing.
We have so much woo on this chart. It's just not even funny.
Yes, we're blown away by the amount of woo that's on this chart.
So I think one of the coolest things is the relationship that we have between Saturn, which is systems and responsibility,
Mhm.
and Venus, which is
The planet of love.
yes, and opening up and receiving.
Yes.
And so
So there is an aspect. There's positive and more challenging aspects, but we have a positive aspect here that when you put those two things together, one way that you can interpret that is friends who work together. So a work friendship. Yeah. So that works out for us. Because Venus being about relationships, and it's also in the sign about that rules relationships with the structure. It's like all the things together. And then that's how one of the ways that you can interpret that. So check on that.
mhm.
We are that.
And then using the step astrology that we have from Sirius Joy and Christopher Witecki, we have a sun sign at a manifestation degree of 10 degrees in the 10th house, which is the house of career,
Yes.
conjunct the action sign of Mars,
Mm-hmm.
and also conjunct midheaven, which is the degree or the place that you are.
Where you're heading.
Yes,
Yes.
your apex.
Yes.
At 13, which is net 4, which is a quantum degree.
Yes. Which we're all about that. I will take the quantum.
And even better, it's all in the house of Sagittarius, which is fun, exploration, adventure. And the sign of Sagittarius, excuse me.
Yeah, the sign of agitation, agitation, sign of Sagittarius, sorry, is also, there's a lot of luck and ambitiousness. That's a very driven sign overall.
And constantly learning. It's another big part of it.
Constantly learning. There's also a spiritual element to that sign as well. And they are attracted by the woo, one could say.
So we've got that whole clunk of woo.
Also, check.
Why don't you tell us about the Pisces?
So Pisces. Okay, so this was what I was really excited about. So Pisces, as a Virgo, I can tell you that Pisces is my opposite sign, which you'd be like, oh, so you're completely opposite. And like, yes and no. We are very similar, but also very different.
She attracts Pisces.
I do attract them. And what I've learned from knowing so many Pisces is that how they're different from Virgo is that Virgo likes to I, in particular, like to take in all this information and I sit with it for a long time. I internalize it, I churn, go through it, and then I finally come to an understanding of it that then I share that understanding. And I don't normally talk about it until that happens. Pisces is the opposite. The mental process is the same of how they're going and thinking about everything. That's all the same. But the difference is that they process it outside of themselves. So in conversation, they're very chatty when they're coming to an understanding, which works out perfectly.
For being a podcast.
That's right.
It's like we're talking through these things. We also have Neptune, which is the planet of imagination,
Yes.
at 24, which is the degree of creativity,
And
in that same place.
yes. And also, Pisces is one of the signs that rules Neptune. So it's kind of extra Pisces. There's a lot of overlap there.
Neptune rules Pisces.
Yes. Thank you. We're in Mercury retrograde right now.
And we're also sitting out what almost every astrologer on the planet is calling the most outrageous and
most action-packed
weekend of the entire year.
Of the whole year.
And it also happens to be 107 degrees outside. And so there's just a lot of pieces going on that are making this a moment in amber.
So, please give me some grace. Switching.
And we're also, I think, super excited. And so we're a little bit tripping over our words.
Yeah. Same thing happened when we recorded before, to be fair. I couldn't talk. I was having a hard time with my words.
Mercury's jumping on our head.
Yes.
But to that end, we have Mercury in the house of community in the sign of Capricorn, which again is those systems and organizing and, I don't know, scheduling things and putting together we don't have a set list. We have a
don't know.
Moving on.
Yes.
We also have Pluto at 28 degrees, which is another manifestation degree, also in the house of community.
And Capricorn.
Yes. And we have the moon
in Leo, which is on the other side of the chart, but it's, also in the house that has to do with like daily routines and like you're action oriented. So there's a lot of emotion, and Leos are known for being stars, they shine, but also having so much heart. And the moon is all about emotion. It rules your emotions. So there's
we're putting a lot of heart into this.
Yes. A lot of our own personal selves that just bringing it above the surface, essentially.
I think the personal part is probably but it's also at 13, which is net 4, which is another quantum degree, like our MC. And the interesting thing is we're not going to share our full charts with you. That's just a little too personal, I think. But
you don't need to know all that.
In a synastry chart, which is where you take two people and see where the connections are and what they have in common, we both have multiple elements that are in common with Pod C.
Yes.
That sort of reinforce the relationship, because I think one of the most fascinating things that I learned in Gene Keys, Richard Rudd talked about how that a relationship is always the third component. So you have the one person and then the other person, and then the entity that's between them is the relationship.
Right.
And so Pod Z being part of the relationship that Mychal and I have. So pulling from both of us.
Pod Z is the table. It's Suzanne, myself, and Pod Z at the table.
Pod Z. Yep. So what else we got?
Let's see. We also have Saturn, which is another planet that there's that relation to Pisces that's in the house of Pisces again. So, and the other interesting thing about Pisces, sorry, I keep going back to that, is that Pisces as a sign is also known for being a very spiritual sign. So the fact that that is so much woo, you have basically tripled down on woo-ness for us with Pod C.
sort of the liminal space between very concrete reality and being on other levels. And I think that that's kind of where we see ourselves as a podcast is we are a bridge, if you will,
Yes.
between the everyday sort of norm world and the world of woo.
Yes. Point out something else is that we have Jupiter that has a more difficult relation to Pluto. And what that does, it actually gives us more drive. It gives us determination to succeed, really.
In
Eh,
the house of manifestation, in the house of communication, in the sign of manifestation, at the degree of intuition.
Yes. So there's a lot of if you believe and if you work for it, if you build it, they will come kind of idea with that whole thing. So just to show you that an element that could seem like it would be more challenging actually can still be beneficial and helpful and be a motivator.
hmm And we have the North Node at 23, which is a net 5, which is a degree of Mercury, which is thinking, communicating, all of that kind of thing, as being where we're going.
Yeah, I will take that.
The highest level of communication, P.S.
A lot of this that I am going to own. We will take that.
And then we have Uranus at 20 degrees, which is passion in
Mhm.
the sign of manifestation in the house of communication,
Yes.
which is also happily aspected to, well, Neptune, Pluto,
Yeah, there's a lot of things that it's getting along with
Mercury.
yes, all the vital components to what you would need, communication, underworld topics or other world topics, I should say. And all of that are all getting together in this very nice dance. They're all working with each other in a very positive light.
And what were you saying about Scorpio, which is the sign of deep dives?
Yes. So Scorpio's known for being kind of the underworld sign. They have a tendency to keep things hidden, but are also attracted to all things under the surface. All of those topics that would be considered woo-woo kind of topics that they're very interested in and naturally have one foot in at all times. So for there, we actually have what's called our lot of fortune and our palace. So both of those things that we are looking for more of a cosmic understanding and
Seems on brand.
yeah, that we're not so interested in the mundane reality, but we are interested in truth. There's a lot of truth that wants to be uncovered. That's a lot of what Scorpio does. One of the reasons why they kind of sit and wait is because they're looking for things to reveal themselves. And so that there's a lot of looking for that kind of information. And where Podsy has success is in dealing with those kinds of topics.
And that's in the ninth house, which is the house of exploration and learning and long distance travel.
Mhm. Which we are all about. We are,
Deeply committed to this concept.
yes, we were hoping for season 3. We're just going to travel to a bunch of woo-woo locations.
Yeah, we're putting that out there.
Yeah.
And then one of the things that people usually get concerned about if they know anything about astrology is like, oh my gosh, Chiron, where's Chiron? And Chiron is where you become healed in something, usually at whatever that degree is,
Mhm.
and then it becomes your superpower.
It's shorthand called the wounded healer is kind of what it does. Like you have a sensitivity to it, but once you own it, understand it, go through it, then as Suzanne's saying, it becomes your superpower, it becomes your strength.
And I'm not sure if it's the Riordan series or if it's Harry Potter. They actually have Chiron as a character. I think it's Rick Riordan.
Mhm.
But anyway, so ours is at the degree of intuition. And so in the sign of action in the house of value. So what that says to me is as long as we value our intuition and act on that, it will be our superpower.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that even when, believe it or not, we would love to say that all of our episodes are one and done, that we just record it once and it's all done. There have been some that we've recorded a couple different times, like this one, because, IT issues or whatever it may be. But even if that's not the issue,
Or guidance that we couldn't hear any other way.
right, which, completely valid. That there's also this other part that is we have to feel like it's right. Sometimes we get done with our conversations, we're like, we didn't felt like it was open-ended, it wasn't making sense, or any number of things,
Yes.
right? And so a lot of that is using our own intuition to be able to tap into what is appropriate to put out there and what our audience would find valuable.
Unfortunately for us, between that Saturn Venus trine, we're pretty in tune with each other of, turning off the recorder and taking off our headphones and looking at each other and going,
No.
no.
Yeah.
So yes. So some behind the scenes for you. All right. So for our next Seasonette astrology episode, we are
Yes.
going to be taking the chart, not necessarily for Pod C, but just in general charts, into the world of astrocartography
Perfect.
and be learning how.
Where should Podsy go?
Yes, we absolutely could do that.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, there you go. Decision made. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.
All the woo, A to Z.